Ever felt like your brain is turning to mush after scrolling for hours? That's brain rot. When too much useless content weakens your focus and thinking skills. But don't worry, it's not permanent. You can prevent and even reverse it with the right habits. Today, Luca and Maria will break down what brain rot is, why it happens, and most importantly, how to cure it. And get your sharp thinking back. And stay tuned till the end for a vocabulary recap and a surprise self-assessment test to boost your English skills. Luca, Maria, take it away.
Hey everyone, ever get that feeling? You know, like your brain's kind of turning to mush, like all that scrolling and all those notifications are making you, well, maybe a little less sharp.
Yeah, I think a lot of people can relate to that these days. It's gotten so common that there's even a name for it now, brain rot, right? And it was such a hot topic that the Oxford English Dictionary actually chose it as the word of the year for 2024.
Which is kind of funny when you think about it. Here we are diving deep into like all the potential problems of just passively taking in content, and we're doing it on a podcast.
It's true, but the hope is that by really getting a handle on what brain rot is all about, we can all, try to be a little more deliberate with how we use our brains, both online and offline.
Okay, so let's break this down a bit. When we say brain rot, what exactly are we talking about? Like, what does the Oxford English Dictionary have to say about it?
Well, they define it as the supposing deterioration of a person's mental or intellectual state, especially viewed as the result of overconsumption of material, particularly online content, considered to be trivial or unchallenging. But it can also be used to describe the content itself, the stuff that people think is leading to that mental decline.
So basically, spending too much time scrolling through mindless stuff can make your brain, mushy. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, that's the gist of it. And what's interesting? It's not even a new idea. The term brain rot actually goes all the way back to 1854. Henry David Thoreau, the author of Walden, used it then.
Whoa, seriously? Thoreau was talking about brain rot way back then, but what was, rotting people's brains in the 1850s? They didn't even have the internet.
He was actually talking about how society tended to go for simple, bite-sized ideas instead of really digging into the complex stuff. He saw that as a sign of, people putting in less mental effort, a kind of a forerunner to our modern brain rot, if you will.
That's really interesting. But it does feel like this whole fear of brain rot has really blown up lately.
Oh, absolutely. Oxford Dictionaries actually saw the use of the term jump by a crazy 230% just between 2023 and 2024. So it really does seem to reflect this growing anxiety we have about our digital habits and how they might be changing us.
And here's where it gets really interesting. You actually helped me understand why our brains might be so susceptible to this whole brain rot thing. Yeah. And it might all go back to our hunter-gatherer ancestors. Crazy, right?
It makes sense when you think about it. Our brains evolved to always be looking for near, exciting things. That's how our ancestors found food, stayed safe from danger, and, just survived. But the problem is, today's internet is kind of hijacking that same wiring.
Right, because every single notification, every little juicy piece of gossip or viral trend we see, it all gives us that little dopamine hit.
Exactly. So we're constantly being rewarded for taking in information, even if it's not really useful or meaningful. Our brains just weren't meant to deal with that kind of nonstop stimulation.
So it's like our ancient brains are stuck in this super modern world that they weren't built for.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. It's called cognitive evolutionary mismatch. And it explains why it can be so hard to resist those addictive apps and platforms. Our brains are being rewired, and it's happening fast.
Now, you mentioned Richard Dawkins earlier. Didn't he have this idea about how ideas spread almost like viruses?
Yes. He called them memes, and he wrote about them in his 1976 book, The Selfish Gene. Originally, he was talking about any bit of cultural information, an idea, a way of behaving, even a style that gets passed from one person to another. But the internet really took memes and, transform them into something totally different.
Right, because now when we say memes, we usually think of those funny pictures and those viral trends that spread like wildfire online.
Exactly. But they're still units of cultural information, like Dawkins said. The internet just makes the whole process so much faster.
So we're basically bombarded by these little bits of information that keep replicating, and a lot of it is designed to trigger strong emotions, even if it's lacking real context. No wonder we feel overwhelmed.
It's like drinking from a fire hose, That makes it really hard to focus on anything that requires more, sustained attention.
Okay, so let's get a little more personal here.
Yeah.
How do we know if we might be experiencing brain rot? Like, does any of this sound familiar to anyone out there?
Well, think about your day-to-day life. Have you
Yeah.
ever found yourself putting off important things, things you really need to get done just because you're glued to your phone?
Oh, yeah, all the time.
Or what about like struggling to focus on work or school because you just can't stop thinking about checking social media? Or maybe you feel super anxious or irritable when you can't get online.
Mm. Guilty as charged on that one.
Well, those could be signs that your digital habits are starting to mess with your mental state.
I guess it makes sense when you consider how dopamine and cortisol play a role in addiction, right? Like we're getting hooked on that constant rush of new information. But I do wonder if sometimes this whole brain rot thing is really a symptom of something else that's going on. Like what if we're just mentally exhausted at the end of a long day and that's why we reach for our phones?
That's actually a really important point. Like, brain rot isn't really an official medical diagnosis. It's more of a cultural phenomenon. It's about, people's anxieties becoming more visible. And of course, we need to be paying attention to how we use our attention. But it's also crucial to consider any underlying mental health issues like stress, anxiety, or even depression.
So maybe instead of just beating ourselves up over brain rot, we should be asking ourselves, what's making me feel so mentally drained to begin with?
Exactly. It's totally possible that like all that mindless scrolling is actually a way of coping with deeper issues, like using junk food to, soothe an emotional hunger. It might make you feel better for a little while, but it doesn't really nourish you in the long run.
So is this more about the platforms themselves or is it more about us? Like, are we just tired of, well, thinking deeply at the end of a long day?
It's probably a bit of both, honestly. These platforms, they're designed to be addictive, but we also have a responsibility to, develop healthier habits and be more deliberate about how we spend our time online.
Which leads us to the big question. What can we actually do about this whole brain rot thing?
Well, the good news is our brains are really amazing. They can adapt, they can change and evolve. Like we actually can rewire those habits. It takes a little effort.
So you're saying it's not like we're stuck with a mushy brain forever. There's hope.
Absolutely. Think of it like any other muscle. You got to exercise it to keep it strong. There are so many things we can do to it's like we can cross-train our brains, you know what I mean? We can boost our cognitive flexibility.
Okay, I like that. So what are some of the best brain exercises we could do?
One of the simplest things is to really pay attention to your mental diet. Just like you choose healthy foods for your body, you can choose high-quality stuff for your mind too.
So less time scrolling through social media and more time, I don't know, reading books, watching documentaries. That sort of thing.
Exactly. And it's not just about what you're consuming, it's also about how you're taking it in. Instead of just passively absorbing information, try to actively engage with it. Ask yourself questions. Think about how it connects to other things you know. Really reflect on what you're learning.
So it's not about ditching the internet altogether. It's more about using it mindfully, right?
Absolutely. Technology can be a powerful tool, for learning and growth. It's just up to us to use it in a smart way.
I've also heard a lot about practicing good digital hygiene. What does that actually look like in real life?
Well, it's about setting boundaries and creating healthier habits around how you're using technology. It could mean things like maybe you set time limits for certain apps, or you create tech-free zones in your house, or even just being more aware of why you're reaching for your phone in the first place.
So maybe I should keep my phone in another room when I'm working or trying to study. Or turn off those notifications so I'm not getting interrupted every 5 seconds.
Exactly. Those are great examples. The key is to find what works for you and stick with it. It takes time to rewire those habits.
I mean, is it really realistic to think we can just disconnect completely? Technology is such a big part of our lives.
No one's saying you have to completely go off the grid, It's really about finding that balance. Sometimes even just a short break, like a digital detox, can be really helpful just to kind of reset and recharge.
Like a weekend without social media.
Yeah, exactly. You'd be surprised how much clearer your head feels when you step away from all that constant stimulation. You might even rediscover some old hobbies or things you used to love doing but kind of forgot about.
Well, speaking of hobbies, I've actually been making an effort to spend more time doing things that don't involve screens. I'm going for more walks in nature, and I even I pick up knitting again.
Those are fantastic examples. Reconnecting with those kinds of analog experiences is a great way to combat that brain rot feeling. It gives your brain a chance to, to relax and to recharge. And who knows, you might even, you might discover new skills or make new connections while you're at it.
It's funny you mention connections, because one thing that's helped me a lot is, well, I've been making a conscious effort to actually spend more time with people face to face.
That's so important. Real life social interaction, it's crucial for our mental and emotional health. It helps us feel connected, supported, and engaged with the world around us. And that's something that can get lost when when we spend too much time in the digital world.
Yeah, it's almost like we're forgetting how to have those meaningful conversations, or just to be present with each other, without constantly checking our phones.
It's true. It's definitely something to be mindful of, because in the end, it's our relationships that really matter. They're what truly nourish us.
This is making me realize that brain rot isn't just about what's going on in our own heads. It's about society as a whole.
Oh, absolutely. If we're all constantly distracted and overwhelmed, it makes it really hard to actually address those complex issues that, that our world is facing. We need people who can think critically, who can empathize with others and who can actually have real conversations.
And that starts with each of us, right? Taking responsibility for our own mental well-being.
Exactly. It's about making choices that support, that support our cognitive health and that allow us to be our best selves in the world.
Now, you mentioned earlier that our brains are plastic. Does that mean we can actually, undo the effects of brain rot?
It really does. That plasticity, it refers to the brain's ability to change and adapt. And that happens throughout our lives. So it's, it's never too late to start developing healthier habits and to work on strengthening those cognitive skills.
Well, that's good to hear. So it's not about beating ourselves up about having brain rot. It's more about understanding how our brains actually work and then using that knowledge to make choices that, that support a healthy mind.
Exactly. Knowledge is power, right? And the more you understand about how brain rot works, the easier it'll be to really be mindful of how you're using your attention. And, it's a precious resource.
So we actually have the power to shape our own brains, rather than just letting, technology shape them for us.
Yeah, I like that. It's about being proactive, not just, reactive.
This whole conversation has been really eye-opening, honestly. I'm realizing that brain rot isn't just some, silly internet joke. It's something we need to take seriously.
Yeah, I agree. But it's also important to remember that we're not, helpless in all of this. We can make choices that help us, that support our cognitive health.
So it's not about being afraid of technology. It's about figuring out how to use it in a way that, that empowers us instead of depleting us.
That's a great way to put it. It's about finding a balance between, all the incredible things that technology offers us and the importance of taking care of our own minds.
So really it comes down to being intentional with our attention.
Exactly.
This has been such a great conversation, seriously. I feel like I have a whole new perspective on how my digital habits might be affecting me, affecting my brain.
I'm glad to hear that. And just remember, even small changes can have a big impact. It's not about, striving for perfection. It's more about making progress and just, being more self-aware as you go.
So for our listeners out there, those of you who are trying to make sense of this whole digital world, which seems to get more and more complex all the time, what's the most important thing to keep in mind?
I'd say it really comes down to, it comes down to being mindful of your attention. That's your most valuable resource. And in today's world, it's everyone and everything is competing for it. All these demands, all these distractions, it's a lot.
It's we're constantly in this tug of war for our own attention.
Yeah, I like that. And the more aware you are of that tug of war, the better you'll be at making choices that really support your well-being.
One thing I find really interesting is how the term brain rot, it's been embraced by Gen Z, by Gen Alpha.
Yeah.
The people who are the most plugged into the digital world. It's almost like they're admitting to the problem, but they're also kind of leaning into it at the same time.
It's true. It definitely shows a level of self-awareness and maybe even a bit of dark humor, right? They see the downsides, but they're not shying away from it.
It makes you wonder if maybe it's a coping mechanism. A way of dealing with this crazy, hyper-connected world we live in.
It's possible, but it's a conversation that's just beginning, and it's important that we all take part in it.
So as we wrap up here, I want to leave our listeners with a question, something to think about. If technology keeps heading in this direction toward creating more and more addictive experiences, then, what responsibility do we have to, develop our own mental immunity?
That's a really great question. And I think the answer is, realizing that we actually have a lot more control over our own minds than we think. We have the power to choose habits that strengthen our focus, our critical thinking, and our resilience. We have the power to be more intentional with how we use technology. And we even have the power to create a world that supports our mental well-being. It's not going to be easy, but it's definitely crucial if we want to thrive in this digital age.
That's a great point to end on. By understanding how our brains work, we can start making choices that lead us to a richer, more fulfilling life, both online and off,
Here's to stronger, healthier brains for everyone.
and to being more mindful of how we spend our attention. It's precious. Thanks for tuning in to our deep dive today. We'll see you next time.
At the end of this podcast, let's do a quick vocabulary recap. First is brain rot, means a decline in thinking ability due to too much useless content. Second is deliberate, means done on purpose, not by accident. Third is trivial, means unimportant or small. Fourth is susceptible, means easily affected or influenced. Fifth is sustained, means continuing for a long time without stopping. Sixth is coping, means dealing with a difficult situation. All right, listeners, it's time for the self-assessment test. Ready to see how your English skills are doing? Take a moment to answer the questions and don't forget to share your score in the comments below. Now the last question is a tricky one. If you get it right, I'll be cheering you on in the comments. But if it's wrong, no worries. I'll drop the correct answer to help you improve. So let's get started. Answer honestly and share your score with us. I can't wait to see how you do.
Thank you for watching. Your journey to better English and unstoppable confidence starts here. Like, share, and subscribe. Let's keep growing together. See you in the next video, champion.